Pre-recorded, this is the Red Ticket Blues podcast. I am Brian Buckley. This is being recorded on February 24th to hit the internets on February 25th, 2016. How are you? How's everybody doing? Remember, you can always listen to the show on iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, YouTube, and follow me on Twitter at BrianBuck13 and at Red Ticket Blues. It is another edition of the weekly Thursday Talk, and this week, I'm lucky enough to have had Mr. Chad Finn, a sports media columnist for the Boston Globe and for Boston.com. We go all around the great city of Boston, get a feel for the sports scene, what's going on there right now, teams, sports radio, things like that. You know, jump into the Celtics, prepare for the Red Sox, all of that, get to know Chad a little bit. So I'm rambling. Let's listen to it. He is the sports media columnist for the Boston Globe and Boston.com. That, of course, is Chad Finn. Chad, welcome to the Red Ticket Blues podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me on, man.
No problem whatsoever. Chad, let's jump right into this. I was reading an article the other day in, I believe it was the Cauldron, about how Boston is not embracing the Celtics the way a 33-25 upstart lovable team should be embraced. You're in Boston, you're writing about these things. Is that an accurate angle, or are we reaching there?
Yeah, I saw that story too, and I skipped it after reading the headline because I knew that guy couldn't possibly know what he was talking about. I mean, that's either not knowing what you're talking about, or that's next level trolling, you know. Because I think people have really embraced the Celtics team, and in a couple of different ways. I think they've been realistic about what the expectation is for this season, and that they're probably not going to hang banner 18 anytime soon, but. They are, a very fun team to watch. They're trending in the right direction, and I think fans, at least the reasonable ones after the trade deadline, looked at this and said, you know, they traded Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett and a couple other parts, you know, Jason Terry to the Nets, got all those picks back just a couple of years ago, and here we are. Since then, they've hired Brad Stevens, which is a brilliant move in its own right. Trade for Isaiah Thomas for basically nothing. Got Jay Crowder in the Rondo deal, who ended up being the best player in the trade. Drafted Marcus Smart, who's kind of a tone setter. Just had a lot of things really work out well, and really shrewd moves by Danny Ainge. And they've turned things around and pointed them the right way in a very short period of time. And the most important thing about all that is the best is yet to come because they have all those Nets picks. So I think if you're a Celtics fan, you are watching because they're really fun to watch. And you're also really optimistic because they've got a lot of assets on the roster right now, and certainly coming with those New Jersey picks the next 3 years.
Yeah, you mentioned
Brooklyn picks the next 3 years.
Well, same team. We get it. Even people in the area still call them New Jersey. It's okay. Expectations for this team, like you mentioned before. I mean, I think they were with the mid to high 40 win range, but so far it looks like they're probably going to exceed those. And next year and the years to come, they need a superstar. And you recently wrote about the guy or even guys the Celtics need to take aim. But for that one guy, please tell us why your guy in Atlanta is worth that max contract for the Celtics.
Yeah, you know, I'm not sure he is. I love Al Horford. But he's 30 years old. He'll be 30 years old. He's got a history of shoulder injuries. But he's a perfect fit. He really is a perfect fit. He's hit more threes this year than he made up his entire career until the season. So he's expanded his game that way. His rebounds are down a little bit. He's averaging about 7 a game this year. His career high was around 10, almost 11. So he's slipped in some regard, and he's certainly not a perfect player, but he's a really, really good player who would be absolutely perfect on this team with what they need and what they try to do. I would pay him. I'd love to see him here. I know it's going to take like $140 million. He's looking for a max deal, and there's certainly some risk there. But I think if you get Al Horford here, this team gets even better than it is now. You mentioned their one-loss record. At this point, you know, they could win 50 games. They'll win in the upper 40s, 50 games maybe if they're really play well from here on out. You add a player like Horford to that, and suddenly this is a place where people are looking at and saying, wow, that team plays hard. They have fun together. They've won a couple playoff series, hopefully, and Brad Stevens is a guy who puts all of his players in position to succeed. He plays with their strength. He's got an uncanny knack for that. I want to go play for that team, and I think that is almost inevitable with a really talented free agent type of player if you can get a guy like Horford in here to be that first quasi-superstar to join up here with what they already have going.
Yeah, that the Horford, again, like you said, he's 30 years old, and it is kind of risky seeing that the salary cap rises next year too. So you're really going to be giving a lot of money to a guy who's got some miles on him.
He does.
One final thing on the Celtics, and that is, you also mentioned this, the bevy of draft picks from the gift that keeps on giving, those aforementioned Nets. Ben Simmons sits there, the jewel of the draft. Now, is this front office going to be crushed if they don't end up with Simmons and then have to deal with an international question mark like Dragan Bender, or a guy still growing into his body like Duke's Brandon Ingram?
No, I don't think they'd be crushed. I think they would be mildly disappointed, but if they land in the top three, I think they'd be pretty happy. Ingram's a guy, he's had some hiccups recently, but before this recent stretch, he was playing really, really well. And you can see the ability that he has. He's so skinny. I mean, he's skinnier than Durant was as a freshman at Texas, and he was rail thin himself. He's got some weight to put on. He's probably not going to be anything close to a finished product early, but the talent's undeniable. We've all seen Simmons. Hopefully, you've taken some time to see him because he's a really fun player to watch, but he can't shoot a lick. I don't know how much he's going to help at the beginning either. I think if you're one of those fans who has heard his name but hasn't really made the effort to watch him play, maybe expectations for what he's going to be next year are unrealistic. He's going to help a team, but he's got ways he needs to grow his game as well. And Bender, nobody's seen him, but he's not playing a whole lot for his EuroLeague team right now, but that doesn't really mean anything. He's a 7-footer. He's got perimeter skills. He's someone Ainge is very familiar with, and I think they would be happy to have any of those players. Of course, Simmons is a prize everybody wants, and Celtics will certainly do some lottery luck, but if they ended up in the top three as one of those guys, I think they'd feel really good about it.
Yeah, Simmons is the name, but watching, I've seen a lot of them. He can't shoot. The defense isn't there. He completely disappeared against Oklahoma about a month ago or so. But I'm also sitting here ripping this guy when in 5 years it's going to look absolutely stupid that I'm ripping him for a few games his freshman year at LSU. And I love Brandon Ingram too. He's got the muscle tone of about Reggie Miller at this point, but I think once it all comes together, he's going to be something very special. Now let's get into you, Mr. Finn. You grew up in Maine, so I'm assuming you're a fan of the local sports scene in Boston. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
And I'm sorry to date you here, but you were in high school in 1986, one of the greatest years in Boston sports history.
Let's see, what year was I? I graduated in 88, so I would have been a sophomore, yes.
Okay.
That was a wonderful year in Boston sports, and I vaguely remember it.
Well, let's see if you can remember this. Set the scene for us if you can do this. Did you think with all the success going on, did you think that, hey, this is pretty cool, I bet this is going to happen every year?
Back then, no. I didn't, because, when you're young, you feel like every year feels like 5 years in a sense. Your life is so short at that point that something happens in 1 year and it feels just like it has enormous magnitude. And so my first year following baseball was 1970. The Red Sox, we know what happened then. And I took that pretty hard. So I kind of had the sense that maybe things weren't going to always work out for the hometown teams right off the bat. And, that was the year where Chuck Fairbanks bailed out on a really good Patriots team. And Celtics were kind of in transition then. That's when they drafted Bird, but of course he had done one more year at Indiana State. So there was always sort of something going on there that made you say, well, maybe this isn't the year. And that cynicism gets built into you pretty quickly around here. At least it did then. So by 86, when it looked like they were going to win the World Series and the Patriots won the Super Bowl and the Celtics had the best team of all time, you really enjoyed it and savored it, even if I was only 16 years old. I felt like I had a lifetime of disappointment already, which is just totally ridiculous, but it's how it felt. So, it was a wonderful year, and I don't know if you expected it to happen every year. Just kind of hoped that they'd get a couple championships out of it. And as it turned out, they got one, and Celtics team we still talk about all the time. Absolutely,
one of the all-time great teams. Indulging in all this at a young age, was the aspiration to be a sports writer? Was that it right there, or did it just sort of happen along the way?
Yeah, that was right around the time. I mean, I had the dream, every other kid of playing, name the position in the team, but it was, for most of us, it was probably left field at Fenway, following, Williams, Yaz, Rice, and the guy coming up then was Mike Greenwell, who looked pretty good early in his career. Sort of faded out when it was Will Cordero and Troy O'Leary and guys like that later on. But every New England kid who loves sports has that dream of playing for the hometown team, and I realized pretty early that wasn't going to happen. When you go your first year in Little League and you only get one hit and that sort of thing. But the best kid in town, you automatically assume that he's going to be a pro player, and then you realize that your Babe Ruth League team can't win a game in the state tournament. And you live in Maine, and you haven't even played Massachusetts or California or whatever. The magnitude of what it takes to be a pro athlete. You realize that pretty young, I think. Hopefully you realize it pretty young. And so I always knew I wanted to be around sports. I love sports, and my dad is a huge sports fan, and he used to bring home the Globe and the Herald every day. And, he'd try to give me the Herald, and I'd be cool with that. He always read the Globe first. And so it was kind of my dream after I realized I wasn't going to play to cover sports and be around sports. And fortunately that has worked out pretty well because, it is what I always wanted to do.
That Globe that your father was always grabbing first, you started working there in 2003 after 9 years at the Concord Monitor in New Hampshire. How did now your current position is sports media columnist. How did that position come about? How did it make its way to you?
Yeah, sports media columnist at the Globe, and I write a sports column at Boston.com, so I kind of split it up. I worked in Concord for 9 years, and we had just some amazing people come through there. A few of the people I worked with have gone on to win Pulitzers. My editor is actually the guy, I think he's the head of the Pulitzer board now, and a bunch of my Globe colleagues worked there, Bob Holer, Fudo Shinzawa, Eric Moskowitz. So it was a really cool place to work right out of college. There's so many inspiring, talented people around and great editors. So that was great. I was a layout person and a copy editor there, and about 5 years into it, I started writing. I realized we were kind of lacking in Patriots coverage, and basically our columnist wasn't really into it, and we didn't cover the teams as beats. So I figured, I could write about why Ty Law is having a great season every once in a while or something like that, and kind of caught on, and so I started writing more columns about more things, and as time passed, I realized how much I liked that and had some success with it. And but my dream was always to come down to Boston, and a position opened up at the Globe. It was up on the copy desk, and it was full-time temporary, which meant they could get rid of me at any time. But I figured it was a risk worth taking, and it was probably dumb at the time. I mean, I just been married, and my wife was pregnant, but it was a lot more money, and it was a place I always dreamed to work in. I felt like maybe if I got my foot in the door, they would realize I was worth keeping around. So that's how it worked out, and I came here and worked on the copy desk in 2003, December 2003, and lo and behold, in 2004, the Red Sox won the World Series, and I didn't have an outlet to write about what I always wanted to write about, and it kind of drove me nuts. So I started a blog, and I started independently of the Globe, and it was touching all the bases. I have blogspot.com. It's still out there in some skeletal form right now. And I built up enough of a readership with that when the internet sort of exploded and all of these outlets around Boston started popping up, Comcast Sportsnet hired a bunch of people, WEI added a website. All these things happened. They looked at me and said, hey, this guy has a blog. Maybe we should move him over to the online side. And so that's what we did. And I started writing there in 2009. And right around that time, the media column opened up, and I'd written something at the very same point about, I wrote that it was really critical and maybe even mean-spirited about WEI, but I meant it at the time. That if another radio station rose up in the Boston market, they would be in trouble. They would have very real competition. And so I wrote that, and it ended up being sort of prescient in a way. Later that year, I think it was August of that year, the Sports Hub launched in Boston, and within a few months, they were right there with the EI and even had surpassed them in the ratings. And when that happened, I had written that online for a little publication we had online. My boss said, "You know what? That was pretty good. Maybe we should put this in the newspaper." And so that's how it worked out. They ended up making me the sports media columnist. They had me write a couple as a tryout and liked them. One of them was on Jack Edwards and something else. And they decided that I was worthy of doing it. So I've been doing it for 6 years ever since.
That's great that the blog is highly acclaimed, has won several awards, and it's funny to hear you say that you were working for, and obviously it's time sensitive, but you were working for a New England newspaper that didn't have enough Patriots coverage and didn't have enough NFL coverage, which is hard to believe at a time like where NFL is the sport. It's hard to fathom. I swear to everyone listening, I did not send my show notes to Chad, but the next thing I say here is, I had Adam Kaufman of WBZ and the Sports Hub on the podcast a few months ago, and he mentioned that he wouldn't be shocked if Boston could handle 3 competing stations, radio stations, that is. What is it about a relatively small city that could drive that much opinion on the airwaves?
Well, it's a ridiculous amount of success is what it is. There's always something to talk about. How many, 8 championships since 2001, right? 1 for the Celtics, 1 for the Bruins, 3 for the Sox, and 4 for the Pats. It's 9 now.
Yeah.
And we were Loserville. Jerry Callahan tagged Boston as Loserville because it's been so long since we had won one. There was the parades where the reception at City Hall for Ray Bork after he won was the Avalanche. It was just we had to cling to that because there was really nothing else, and it had been so long. It had been since the '86 Celtics. So the fact that the teams are in competition for a title virtually every year, or in some form of transition where they're either coming off winning a championship or competing for a championship, or trying to get back there again, like the transition we talked about the Celtics going through after the KG Pierce, Ray Allen years to where they are now. That's fascinating stuff. And so that sort of spurs easy conversation. I mean, you've had Belichick and Brady for 15 years. That never ceases to be interesting. The Red Sox won in 2004. They won with a different team in 2007, and they won with a different team again unexpectedly in 2013. So there's always something to talk about. And that has really fed the beast on both stations. I don't know if 3, I think that would be pushing it, and I think there would be trouble if the teams fell off and suddenly you had 4 teams performing like the Bruins are this year, where they're just sort of mediocre and aggravating. And so I think it's really the success of the teams that's really driven and pushed a lot of this. And the sports radio stations have really, really benefited from it.
Be interesting to see if because at a certain point there probably will be some mediocrity to see how sports radio in Boston goes. I mean, I listen to a lot of sports radio in Boston and in New York, and most of New York is a little rough right now, other than the Mets. So yeah, it could be somewhat a future for Boston at some point. I just want to touch on this real quick, and I listen to Boston sports radio. I'm still constantly hearing about the Patriots and Deflategate.
Right.
Is giving back the first round pick for the Patriots the only way to move on completely, or is this always going to be a topic for as long as Roger Goodell is the commissioner?
Well, it's going to be for a while longer, because it's not over. Brady's got to deal with the NFL's appeal here now coming up in March. It's really ridiculous if you think how long ago this all started up and why it started up. I mean, it's just crazy that this story is elongated to over a year now. I mean, popping up after the FC Championship game before they won the Super Bowl to being this, it's just adds to the absurdity of the whole thing. But it's going to be something we talk about for a long time. I mean, they're losing this pick, so we'll be talking about it in April for the draft. If a player goes in that range after the Patriots would have picked in the low 30s to maybe 35, 38, and ends up being a real cornerstone player for somebody, well, you're going to remember that. You can remember, wow, maybe Belichick would have drafted that guy. We always play that game. So it is something that's going to be out there for a long time, unfortunately.
Yeah. the biggest headline outside of Deflategate this year in Boston was probably the unceremonious departure of Red Sox TV play-by-play guy and fan favorite Don Orsillo. Now, did NESN have any idea the fan backlash would be as brutal as it was?
No, I don't think they did. I think they're completely taken aback at and that was sort of the root of everything that happened there. They're taken aback by his popularity, especially in terms of I don't know how to classify the people, but it seemed to me it was an older demographic who really liked Don and Jerry, that they considered them sort of their companions, that they were on their TV and thus in their living room every night. And so you felt like you knew these guys. And Don was such a pleasant guy. I mean, so goofy. You sort of felt like, your favorite nephew if you're an older person or somebody like that. And people really liked that. And he did a good job. I think there was a real strong consensus that he did good at his job and had gotten better at it over the years and become a really good play-by-play broadcaster and an engaging one. And so when he lost his job for no apparent reason other than the fact that they wanted to make a change, that made people mad. I mean, you can relate to that. You do a good job, you work hard in your job, and somebody takes it away just because they can, you're going to be mad. And so that was another element to it. And, one of the strange things to me about it, Brian, was Dave O'Brien's been here for 9 years and been on the radio broadcast. And I heard from a lot of people who just weren't familiar with him, which surprised me. But then I started getting the emails, and they would be it'd be from a 75-year-old woman in Cranston, Rhode Island, who's never going to watch NESN again because they liked Don so much. And then, 68-year-old guy from Brockton who really enjoyed them and had heard them call so many games through this great stretch of Red Sox history, and how could it ever be the same again? And who's this Dave O'Brien guy? I think he is. Well, he's been here for a long time. He's really, really good at his job. And as it turned out, NESN did him no favors by the way they handled this. It was their prerogative to make a move. You can make an argument they've got a better guy in there. I mean, he's a tremendous broadcaster who has a long pedigree. What he's done for the Red Sox, what he's done for ESPN. He's worked for the Mets and the Braves and the inaugural Marlins broadcast. He's had a really great career, and he's from here. He's one of us, and yet none of this was emphasized when they made the change. It was
not at all.
Oh my God, people are really mad. They're really mad about Orsillo, and
I think not to interrupt you. Those same fans were probably upset and said the same things when Sean McDonough left and was replaced by Don Orsillo.
Yeah, probably. It's true, except it's a much greater element of it now because the Red Sox are, they're not as big as they've ever been. That peak was probably post-2004, but they're bigger than they were then when Sean McDonough left in 2001 for sure, and that certainly did affect people.
I'll say this. This is how good the Remy and Orsillo were. Full confession, I'm a Yankee fan. But whenever the Yankees and Red Sox play, I watch. I'm sorry. I know you didn't even want to do this podcast now. All right, thanks, Chad, for being on. All right, we're done. Whenever the Yankees play the Red Sox, I put the Red Sox broadcast on. I love listening to those guys. Absolutely, every single time. And my wife loves it because she's a Red Sox fan. So we can sit there and watch the game in peace and happiness.
That's how you have a good marriage.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how you do it. Yeah, I think it was absolutely terrible what they did to Don. I thought he was great at what he did, and I think he'll make a lot of people happy in San Diego, and hopefully can draw a lot of interest there. Transitioning from the booth to the field, there are two pictures making the rounds on Twitter. You wrote about one of them. The first is the Davids hugging it out, bearing the hatchet, and Pablo Sandoval's just enormity. You wrote today, maybe it's not about his weight. Maybe it's about his diminishing the player using the chicken or the egg theory. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, the Red Sox say they're not concerned whatsoever, or it's not that big of a deal. John Henry's throwing body mass weight out today. Tell me a little bit about what maybe you said today, that maybe weight has nothing to do with it, and it's just the player itself.
Yeah, I mean, you can make a connection with it for sure. You can say he's probably declining faster than he would if he were in great condition. You can say that he's damaging his body by being out of shape, and that's going to lead us to a steeper, faster, earlier decline. All those things would make sense. But to me, they shouldn't have signed him even if he was the most fit guy in the world, if he's Mr. Universe, because the reality is he had fallen for 3 straight seasons with the Giants. I mean, his peak year was 2009. It was a monster season. He was, in the second year then, I believe. He had a great season in 2011 as well. But since then, he's slipped a little bit every year. And some of that was masked, I think, by the Giants' postseason success and his role in that success. He was brilliant in 2012 and just as good in 2014 when they won the World Series. But the much greater sample size over the full seasons was that he was a player who was in decline. And it kind of shocked me. He was somebody Ben Cherington would be interested in because they were very analytic. They tended to catch guys aim to catch guys on the upswing of their careers. It's the mistake they made with Rick Porcello last year was they thought they were catching a pitcher going into his prime. Sandoval didn't strike me as a guy that Cherington would target. I think what happened, and this is my educated hunch on this, is they had a black hole at third base. Will Middlebrooks, they knew wasn't going to make it. Karen Caccini had stalled out at AAA. He was a good prospect. And so management, Tom Werner, John Henry, I suspect Tom Werner because he's got Nesson ties, came into it and said, this guy would be really popular here, like El Guapo. They're going to love him. He's chubby and he's just awesome in the World Series. And Cherington looked at it and said, yeah, but his OPS has fallen off 3 straight years. But you know what? It's going to be better than what we have. And if it makes Tom happy and it's John's money, sure, why not? And so they signed him. And what they caught was a guy who didn't really start well, and that got him off to a bad start with the Boston fans. And he's a sensitive guy, so that had a negative effect. And then the fact that he declined 3 years in a row, he declined for a 4th year in a row, and it was a steeper decline than he had had in any of the previous seasons. And so you're looking at a 29-year-old overweight third baseman now who, no matter what his physical conditioning is, you have a long, pretty pronounced track record now of him not playing well, playing a little bit worse each season. And so I don't know that it's realistic to expect him to bounce back this year, no matter whether he's got 17% body fat or he's overweight for what a professional athlete should be.
But he's decreased from 20% from last year. That's what John Henry told us. That's a good thing.
He doesn't pass the eye test on that, though, does he?
He certainly doesn't. Yeah, I mean, chubby and winning in San Francisco, that's cute. Chubby and losing in Boston, it's not so much.
Well, if he was good, if you were getting 2011 Pablo Sandoval, he'd be beloved here because he could hit and he was a good third baseman, and everybody knows how much people liked Rich Garces when he was here. Because not only was he out of shape, jovial, out of shape guy, but he was a great relief pitcher, great setup guy for a couple of seasons. And Sandoval he was terrible last year. And when you're terrible, it's really easy to look at the physical conditioning and say that's the reason.
I personally hate farewell tours. And like I said, I'm a Yankee fan. I was nauseated by Derek Jeter's probably by the middle of April.
Is that still going?
Yeah, I think it is. I think he's going to get some gifts tonight, actually. Minor league stadium somewhere in Tampa. But David Ortiz will get his this year. Do you think it's possible? Maybe I think there's probably other people that think this too, but it's possible that if he rakes and dominates the world, do we get to see 2 tours of goodbyes from Papi? Does he come back? Because, I mean, Jeter was a shell of anything. Ortiz is still a great player.
Yeah, Jeter, as great as he was, he probably hung around for a year too long. I mean, you can never fault anybody. Why do you want to go?
Yeah.
But and he had as decorated a career as anybody, so it's probably particularly hard to say goodbye. But sometimes the time comes, and it came for Jeter. Ortiz is a really interesting case because you look at the numbers, and he really shouldn't be good this year, but he was great last year.
Yeah.
He's 40 years old. He had 37 homers last year. The record for home runs by a 40-year-old is 34 by Darrell Evans, and then it falls off steeply after that. Logically, if Ortiz hits 25 homers this year, it's a good season, but I think the expectation is he's going to hit more than that just because he was so good last year. And the Red Sox are kind of counting on him to do that, too. So there are a lot of variables in this farewell tour because this isn't one last hurrah like it sort of was for Jeter, where you knew he wasn't the player he used to be. This is a guy the Red Sox are counting on in the middle of their order, and he's had some slow starts in the past. He had one last year, so this could turn a couple of different ways depending on how he looks in early going and whether he's the guy that people are still expecting him to. There's a lot of weight on his shoulders still.
Yeah. You think he gets that wanted standing ovation at Yankee Stadium this year?
I think so. You know how Yankee fans are. It's the same way here.
Right.
They appreciate greatness, and they also like to be able to say that they appreciate greatness.
Right.
You know, kind of Red Sox fans the same way, where we're classy, that kind of thing. So, I think he does. I mean, he's had some obviously incredible moments against the Yankees, some that sort of turned the tide of the rivalry for a while, and certainly changed Red Sox history. I think they'll appreciate that, and they'll probably cheer him going away as well.
So let's look at this team as a whole. 78 and 84 last year, but I've seen 8-1 odds to win the World Series. There were the big acquisitions of Price and Kimbrel, but maybe I'm just out of the loop here. What am I not exactly seeing? Is this lofty prediction justified? I mean, is it just people getting better, people getting healthy? I mean, what are your thoughts on the predictions for the World Series for this team?
Yeah, I'm a little skeptical. You know, the big thing, well, they did the two big things. They got David Price to head the rotation, which they needed. If he stays healthy, that's a few more wins for sure. And they rebuilt a bullpen. They've got power arms out there now with Kimbrel, Carson Smith. Hopefully Koji can handle the 8th inning and stay healthy, even though he's 41 years old. He was still very effective last year before he broke his hand. So much better in that regard, but you don't know what the rotation is after Price. That's still a mystery how those guys are all going to slot in. And the big question to me is if Ortiz falls off, where does the offense come from? They had a very good offense last year. I think they finished third in runs. A lot of that felt like stat padding late in the season when they were out of it. But for a team that had a good lineup last year, you can go almost player to player and have a significant question. Now, Mookie Betts and Xander Bogaerts are both wonderful young players. They're 23 years old, two best guys on the Red Sox roster, got brilliant present, brilliant future, all of that. But improvement for young players isn't always linear. It doesn't always happen in the same increment year to year. And you look at these two guys and you say, if they're as good as they are last year, well, okay, that's pretty darn good. But who's going to improve this lineup if Ortiz falls off at age 40 a little bit? And is it Hanley Ramirez? Who knows? He didn't home run the second half. Is it Sandoval? He's fallen off all those years. We don't know what Rizzo Castillo is. We don't know what Jackie Bradley is. We don't know who the starting catcher is going to be. Whether Blake Swihart's progress in the second half last year is something that carries over into the season. Does Pedroia stay healthy? It's a lot of talent here. It was a good run-scoring offense last year, but for a team that's expected to really hit the ball, it seems like they have an awful lot of question marks and variables in there that could go one way or the other.
Okay, so I'm not crazy. All right, good. Recently you became a member of the Baseball Writers of America, meaning you can vote on the Hall of Fame. Now it seems.
Yeah, in 8 years I can.
Oh, in 8? Oh, you're not. You can't vote yet.
You got to wait 10.
Oh, jeez. Okay, well this still applies. Members have loosened their stance on steroid era guys. My question to you is, would you ever elect a guy when you have the opportunity that has admitted using performance-enhancing drugs?
Yeah, I would. Because I'm a rational person. I think I have a lot of common sense, and to me, there are probably multiple PED users already in the Hall of Fame that we don't know about. I mean, it was certainly widespread in that era from early 90s, 93, 94, 95, certainly after the strike to was the strike no longer strike to testing, 2005 in that range. And I think you really have to be naive to look at the Hall of Fame and look at guys that have been elected the last 20 years and say, he was clean. No, he played at age 40. Yeah, he was clean. He had throw 340 at age 38. Definitely didn't do anything. There are guys in there that did stuff, and we just don't know who their names are. I also think there are different levels of it. There are guys who maybe did certain things, and there are guys who built their entire career around it. So it's just such a nuanced and tricky thing, and it stinks. My personal approach is that it's almost become a cliche, but it's a museum celebrating baseball history, and it feels incomplete to me without guys like Bonds and Clemens and you need to address what they did, put it on their plaque, put a giant asterisk on their hat, do what you got to do. But I believe there's a void there without those guys.
Alex Rodriguez, what do you think?
It's an interesting one. He's rehabbed his image in the span of a year. He's the best broadcaster Fox Baseball's ever had, and had a good season last year. But he had so many strikes against him with PEDs. It's sort of the same thing with Manny Ramirez. He's one of my favorite players I've ever watched. But he got nailed multiple times after testing was implemented. And,
it's tough for those
A-Rod's
guys.
sort of been. Yeah, they're in the same boat, and I don't know. I think we're going to find out, hopefully find out more information in the time between when A-Rod's eligible. Certainly, Manny's coming up here a little bit sooner, but that maybe clarifies things a little bit. But I go for A-Rod. He's had an incredible career. He's I think I would. I go back and forth on it, but just a ridiculous career, and certainly not a genuine guy.
No, not at all.
By any stretch, but I think probably there are guys who did some similar things who were in that didn't get caught.
Very, very, very interesting. Now, Chad, you wrote for Father's Day. You wrote a long-form piece about coaching your daughter's basketball team, which is excellent. It was great work, and I recommend it to everyone, honestly. It's pinned on your Twitter page at Globe Chad Finn. No problem. I really sincerely mean that. Now, was this sort of a picture album for you? Because, I mean, you mentioned in the beginning the snapshots you forget and everything. Was this for you or down the road a picture album? And my other question is, has your daughter read this?
It's funny. It ran on Father's Day, but I had started working on it a few months before and just sort of ditched it about halfway through. I was like, it was supposed to be more of a piece about actually coaching my daughter's basketball team and the experience of that, and a little more stuff about the kids and what basketball is like for girls at that age, and how important it can be in their lives, and how important sports are for girls. And sort of shifted it a little bit. The more I thought about it and the more breathing room I gave it there in that span. And when I went back to it, I thought, this probably would work on Father's Day, and our season had just ended, and I was kind of sentimental about the way it ended. So it was something I probably wrote mostly for myself. I just wanted to get it out there because I had so many thoughts and so much emotion about coaching my daughter and her friends at that age, and sort of seeing her turn from a little kid who loved pushing me around the yard and kicking the soccer ball off my forehead to being someone who was really finding value in sports and finding confidence from being part of the team, and all those just incredible benefits that you get from sports, from participating in sports, and the social aspects and all of that stuff, and tied into my own personal experiences growing up and loving basketball. So I took it in that direction, and it was more for me just to spill out my own emotions and to write about it while it was fresh in my mind. But the side effect was all the moms in town think I'm awesome now because they all read it. And one of the girls on my daughter's team came up to me afterwards and said, just out of the blue, my mom read your story and you made her cry, but I just looked at the pictures. And that kind of summed
Very
up,
honest.
their point of view on it. But my daughter hasn't read it yet. I think she will when she's a little bit older. And, it'll be a Valentine for her at that point for sure. But, it's still the same experience. My last year coaching her, and we're right in the middle of it right now. And then she goes to officially middle school next year, and somebody else will be coaching her because I won't have the time to be able to do it every day. So definitely an emotional time right now. And I'm glad I got that out there last year when I did.
Oh, it was absolutely excellent, and I want to thank you. No problem. I want to thank you, Chad Finn, for being on the Red Ticket Blues podcast. But to play us out, I have 3 quick questions for you. You ready?
You got it.
I know you're a coffee fan. Iced coffee, hot coffee, or both?
Iced.
Really?
Even in February, yes, sir.
Wow, I was not expecting that answer. Okay, that's fair. Is Bill Buckner, in your mind, a Hall of Famer?
Just a little bit short, but nobody's ever going to forget him.
Yeah, that is true. And finally, who is the nicest athlete you have ever met?
Ooh. Wow, that's a good one. I feel like this should be an obvious name that comes up there. It's just not popping into my head. I'll tell you, here's a recent one. quick answer. I was talking about my daughter. I took her to the Warriors game when they were in town. When they came in 23-0. It's an event. They're an event now. Every 11-year-old kid, every adult loves watching Steph Curry at this point. He's the biggest name in probably professional sports right now. The most fun thing going on is the Warriors. And he could not have treated kids better. It was really refreshing to see a guy of that magnitude stopping after his warm-up, which everybody watches, and going down the edge of the tunnel and just signing autographs and engaging the kids and just being a nice, normal, approachable person. That was really cool to see. So I don't know Steph Curry at all, but he's right there at the top of my list among guys I've been impressed by.
Very, very nice. He is the sports media columnist for the Boston Globe and Boston.com. Chad Finn. You can follow him on Twitter at GlobeChadFinn. Good luck the rest of the season with the basketball and your daughter's team. Mr. Finn, thank you for being on the Red Ticket Blues podcast.
And the Celtics, too. Get them to 51.
Thanks a lot, man.
Thank you. Very fun.
And I want to personally thank Mr. Chad Finn for coming on. He was an excellent guest. He's an excellent writer, and you should definitely follow him on Twitter. Excellence abound for Mr. Finn. Remember, you can listen to this podcast and every other podcast I've ever done, ever, on iTunes, TuneIn, Radio, Stitcher, YouTube, and follow me on Twitter. That's the venue at Red Ticket Blues and at Brian Buck 13. Go to the website redticketblues.com. Like the show on Facebook, and you really love the podcast, well, you're going to subscribe to it so you don't miss an episode, and you're going to give it a rating and review if you haven't done so already. So enjoy the rest of your day. With all that being said, I am out of here.